In this video, where did the Sumerians come from? How they were founded, their view of religion, their relationship with science, the development of writing in the Sumerians, how the Great Flood affected the Sumerians, and its collapse. I wish it to be an informative and enjoyable video in the taste of a documentary enjoyable watching. Sumerians. The first civilization, the first state, and the first social society. Why are the Sumerians important? The answer to this question is actually very clear. The science of history cares about the Sumerians at least as much as it cares about the creation of the world. Human beings started to present findings and information to the science of history after they started to move to social life and state order. In this respect, the Sumerians, the first society, and the first state are as important as the creation of the world in terms of history. The Sumerians, who are accepted as the starting point of history, have been a legendary society that adopted a huge geography in the difficult ages when human beings lived scattered and nomadic, created the first state, the first form of government, created the first cultural artifacts, the first writing, and presented civilization to mankind. The emergence of the Sumerians, their development, and the fact that they were the building blocks of world civilizations has made Sumerian history a separate branch of science, because Sumerian history is too deep and difficult to be an ordinary research subject. The Sumerians continued their existence for a very long time, 2,000 years, during which time they ruled large masses of human communities under a single roof and created the ancient civilization that we still bear traces of. When the history of Sumer is traced from the moment the Sumerians appeared on the stage of history, we will come across a long historical adventure dating back to 6,000 years before the present day. This historical adventure begins in 4000 BC. In the 9000s BC, in the Caucasus geography in the northern regions of the Khazars, the first white-skinned human communities of mankind had emerged. This society, a new race, had physical characteristics that clearly distinguished them from the people of that time. They were not slanty-eyed, had white skin and thick bone structure, and were the earliest ancestors of all the white races of today. This first white race survived and multiplied in the northern regions of the Caspian Sea, their ancient homeland. And when they became overpopulated, a group of them migrated to the east of the Caspian Sea. This region, known as the Eastern Caspian region, around today's Lake Aral, was inhabited by another slant-eyed, dark-skinned tribe. The Amerinds, the ancestors of the Native Americans, now known as red-skinned people, were living in the northern regions of Asia at this time. Just like the white race, a group of Amerinds also migrated to the vicinity of Lake Aral around the same time. These two different communities met at Lake Aral and lived in the same geography, living together for a long period of 2,000 years and forming a common society. This society, which evolved through intermarriage and genetic relationships and gained an independent identity, created a unique culture in the 2,000 years they lived together. This white race and Amerindian hybrid society embarked on a migration movement towards the south in large masses with the independent culture and ethnic identity structures they developed in the 5000s BC. As a result of this migration movement, they lived in the territory of present-day Turkmenistan for a long period of 1,000 years. The remains of this society, the ancestors of the Sumerians, dating back to 5000 and 4500 BC, are clearly visible in their kurgans and graves, and it can be determined from the artifacts they left behind that these societies had an exceptionally strong cultural structure. This society, the ancestors of the Sumerians, embarked on a new migration movement from the Turkmenistan region, which they made their new homeland by migrating from the vicinity of Lake Aral in the 5000s BC, and reached Mesopotamia by moving westward from the south of the Caspian Sea in the 4000s BC. This Asian tribe, a hybrid of the white race and Amerinds, built the first civilization and the first state in history. This social state did not call themselves Sumerians, as it is believed. The title they gave themselves was Kenger. The term Sumer comes from the term Shinar, which was first encountered when the Kenger people, whom we know as the Sumerians, began to be researched. This society is referred to as Sinar in the Torah, Sumer in Akkadian, and Sanhar in Hittite. Of these different expressions, Sumer in the Akkadian inscriptions, which is the most respected source, is preferred, and they are called Sumerians. However, this society expressed themselves as Kenger society in their own written sources. Therefore, it is most correct for us to address them as Kengers, the name they gave themselves. However, since their title is mentioned as Sumerians in historical researches, we are obliged to use this name. The ancestors of the Sumerians, the society that fused with the white race and Amorans in 6000 BC and formed an independent ethnic cultural structure in this region, migrated to the Turkmenistan region in 5000 BC, and then descended to Mesopotamia from the south of the Caspian Sea in 4000 BC, which laid the foundations of the Sumerian civilization. The first Sumerians, who loved drawing pictures and expressing what they felt, shaped what they felt, sculpted clay and mud sculptures, drew pictures and found writing by developing these skills. This society, which initially expressed their feelings with pictures, transformed these pictures into symbols in time to make them both easy to draw and easy to process in small areas. When these symbols began to reach a certain standard by being used frequently, they became understandable by everyone, and symbols with certain standards began to express thoughts. Symbols that expressed a certain thought or person on their own became even more practical and began to express a syllable and a sound announcement. And when these sound announcements were combined, they began to turn into an alphabet that expressed more words with fewer types of symbolic shapes. The adventure of picture symbol and alphabet, which developed with social manifestations, became official, and its development process accelerated with a remarkable manifestation when the Sumerian priests developed this expression technique and recorded social events. It was around 3200 BC that the Sumerian priests put into writing the sentences expressing their thoughts through symbolic announcements. It is not possible to identify a specific year in which the Sumerians established a state organization. The way the Sumerian state was organized. The Sumerian societies, who acted together within their own tribes, gathered around the strongest tribe when they became large masses and ensured their freedom by protecting the physical region they were in together. The Sumerians, who were organized in this manner in Lake Aral, Turkmenistan, and eventually Mesopotamia, institutionalized their organizational structure over time and took on a federative structure derived from the United Nations, where regional site-states and site-states came together. They also acted together with neighboring and related Sumerian city-states from the same origin and acted jointly against possible threats, and continued their independent existence after the threat was eliminated. With this organizational structure, the Sumerians had established 35 city-states, large and small. The Sumerians lived in Mesopotamia, where they set foot in the 4000s BC in crowded masses spread across the whole of Mesopotamia. At this time, there were no other competitors to challenge or threaten a society as populous as the Sumerians. This made it possible for the Sumerians to gain social, cultural, religious, and scientific prominence. The Sumerians, who lived a prosperous life in fertile lands, reflected their already strong culture in artistic works, creating sculptures, rock paintings, and structures built with great effort. The Sumerians, who believed in a life after death before they set foot in Mesopotamia, believed that their lives had a purpose and that they would be divinely rewarded for this purpose. The Sumerians, who started to motivize their religious beliefs with the influence of the riches they acquired socially, first made their leaders kings and then sanctified them by attributing divine powers to them when the state organization took on the status of a site-state. By 3600 BC, the Sumerians were living a prosperous life, pledging allegiance to their king, the leader of their city-state, who was considered sacred. Having acquired a sacred identity, the kings, as the leaders of their society in the context of the beliefs they had developed, were able to communicate with the holy spirits. In order to appease their anger, they built high shrines and offered sacrifices to them in locations close to the sky. Priests were appointed to support this belief, and these priests ensured the sanctity of the holy king, the unquestionable leader, and the loyalty of the society to him. The development of writing in the Sumerians was also carried out by the priests, who were appointed as a kind of state officials. The Sumerian priests created the first written documents by using alphabetic symbols consisting of voice announcements on clay tablets with the method of writing in order to teach historical matters, the words of the deity kings they considered sacred, and the myths of their religious beliefs more easily to the priests who would come after them. It was actually not very difficult for the Sumerian priests to find the alphabet system that forms the basis of today's writing system. This is because the ancient Asian tribe, which constitutes the origin of the Sumerian society, has been giving meanings to the pictures they have been drawing since 10,000 BC, and engraving an event, an emotion, or a case on the rocks so that the next generations could perceive it with these meaningful pictures. This society, which first depicted what they wanted to express in a large and distinct shape for easy understanding, standardized the shapes and drawings over time, even though the same expression could be expressed with similar but different figures. For example, the figure of a man praying began to be used as a silhouette of a stick man with his hands outstretched in the air. Over time, a person's appeal to the creator could be easily expressed with a single figure. With this method, the figures expressing a certain meaning became uniform and similar to each other. Over time, the figures simplified and turned into tamgas as the emotion, thought, or event to be expressed became easier to write. Because these writings were used on objects such as stones, rocks, and marbles, which were very difficult to work, and the need to express with shapes was increasing. Moreover, this method was becoming more and more popular, and longer and more detailed meanings were being expressed. This Asian tribe, the ancestors of the Sumerians, created the stamp system by turning the meanings they attached to the pictures they drew into figures. Rock and cave paintings have been inscribed on millions of stones across the vast steppes of Asia since 10,000 BC. There are hundreds of thousands of surviving stone inscriptions alone. All these paintings correspond to the stamps that follow, and the stamps are very similar to the Sumerian alphabet. The invention of writing by the Sumerian priests in 3200 BC is, as can be understood, the systematization of an ongoing habit. The thoughts, events, and incidents expressed in pictures and tamgas were transformed into alphabets through the planned work of the Sumerian priests. This work of the Sumerian priests is actually considered the starting point of history, because writing is civilization itself. Societies ensure that subsequent generations can learn and continue by putting the values they have created in writing. The cultural equipment acquired by a generation cannot be transferred to the next generation most of the time due to war, natural disasters, migration movements, and limited opportunities. Even if some of them can be transferred, a large part of decades of cultural accumulation disappears. By enabling the transfer of events and social values to the next and even much later generations, writing has enabled the preservation of cultural values inherited from generation to generation in a social pool. The writing system used for the first time by the Sumerians in 3200 BC spread first to Mesopotamia and then to the whole world after the weakening and collapse of the Sumerian state, and provided an extraordinary material for the development of world civilization. The Sumerians had very mystical and fantastic beliefs in terms of their religious beliefs. Religion in the Sumerians manifested as a polytheistic form of belief. According to the Sumerians, every object had a god. These gods were immortal beings with human appearance but superhuman powers. All humans were created to serve these gods. These gods did not tell humans what they wanted, but humans could ask them what they wanted and get answers. Humans communicated with the gods through temples called ziggurats. Ziggurats were run by priests, people who could communicate with the gods. The priests would ask the gods what they wanted, offer sacrifices to them, and beg them not to torment them. Priests were appointed by the Sumerian kings. The Sumerian kings were also the highest-ranking priests and were demigods. Their divine mission was to rule the people. According to this belief, people who served the gods worked on behalf of the gods by fulfilling the orders of their holy king, worshipped, sacrificed to, and communicated with the gods through the ziggurats, built by the holy king and appointed by the priests. Ziggurats were built as high as possible in the conditions of that day, because it was necessary to go as high as possible to be close to the sky god, the most powerful of the gods, the supreme god. Ziggurats had at least 3 floors and were not only used as temples. The lowest floor was used as a storehouse for supplies and necessities, the middle floors as a school and temple, and the top floor as an observatory. When we examine the information on the origin of the Sumerian polytheistic religious beliefs about the coming of the gods into the world, the creation of the universe, and the creation of man, we come across very interesting information. According to this information, Anu and Ki, the first gods, merged, and Enlil, the god of air, was born as a result of their union. When Enlil separated heaven and earth, his father Anu took over the sky and his mother Ki took over the earth. Later, with the union of Enlil and his mother Ki, Ninmah, the mother goddess, was born. All other gods descended from Enlil and Ninmah. After the descent of the gods, the descent of humans took place. Enlil, the god of air, the father of all the other gods except Anu and Ki, creates Ashnan, the god of grain, and Lahar, the god of cattle, to serve the gods on the advice of the wise god Enki. Initially serving the other gods, Ashnan and Lahar later disagreed and started fighting with each other, and the gods had to do their own work on earth. Tired of this situation, the gods took the matter to the wise god Enki. To solve the problem, Enki ordered the mother goddess Ninmah to create humans to serve the gods. But humans, created in the form of gods, would not have the immortality that the gods had. The wise god Enki's order to create human beings makes the other gods very happy, and a feast is organized where they have fun and get drunk. Due to the drunkenness of the gods, the humans created by Ninmah are born with defects. Then the wise god Enki also creates humans and sends them to the earth, but Enki's creations are also flawed. Upon these events, arguments took place between the gods. As a result of these arguments, the mother goddess Ninmah curses the sky god Enlil. In this way, the gods become at odds with each other, and in this confusion, the human beings created come into the world as imperfect and incomplete. In this context, humans, by virtue of their creation, had a duty to serve God and the world. In line with this duty, they worked, served nature, and made offerings to the gods. They feared that the gods would be angry and punish them for not fulfilling their duties. The Sumerians were well ahead of their historical stage in the field of science and technology. At the same time, societies in other geographies had not yet begun to live in shelters and cities, and those who had settled down were living in relatively primitive structures. However, the Sumerians were able to make pots, pans, cauldrons, bread-baking tandoors, and various household items. In addition, the Sumerians were able to process hard metals, and they were able to build 2- and 3-story houses using stone, adobe, and bricks, using an advanced building technique. The Sumerians were able to drain swamps and carry water to their living areas through canals, prevent floods by building dikes, and preserve water, the source of life, by building dams using an enormous irrigation system. With regular irrigation, they were able to get extraordinary yields from their agricultural lands and store the crops they obtained. The Sumerians, who also invented the wheel, were cultivating their agricultural lands with oxen and plows. In addition to social development, they were also ahead of all other societies in the field of science and technology. The Sumerians, who laid the foundations of mathematics and geometry, found the 4 operations that are the basis of mathematics and were able to calculate the area of a circle. In addition to all these, they achieved great success in time calculation and used an advanced calendar. In the Sumerian calendar, the world's first calendar based on the lunar year, the year was calculated as 360 days and the months as 30 days each. In addition, the Sumerians, who also invented the sundial, were able to calculate not only days and months, but also hours with the movements of the sun. The activities of the Sumerians in the field of science formed the foundations of today's mathematics, geometry, and astronomy. The Sumerians, who had a national identity, had a matriarchal family structure in the pre-flood period. In the matriarchal structure, women were more respected than men, and family and social traditions developed on the axis of women. The matriarchal structure, which disappeared after the flood, was replaced by a patriarchal structure, and they adopted a male-dominated social structure. The highest class in the Sumerians, who were socially divided into classes, were the clergy and soldiers. The second class consisted of the people, that is, the Sumerian society itself, and the third class consisted of the slaves, that is, the servants who were captured in wars and were obliged to serve in exchange for their lives. For a long time after the flood, the clergy, who were at the top of the social class, took over the administration of Sumerian cities, which were governed as site-states, and the most senior priests took over the administration of the state as the Holy King. The milestone of Sumerian history was the Great Flood. The flood that we encounter in Sumerian history is the same as the flood of Noah mentioned in the holy books. Although the date of the flood cannot be clearly determined from the Sumerian ruins, the information in the holy books and the ruins in Mesopotamia give us some clues about the flood. In the light of the research and findings in this field, it is possible that the Great Flood of the Sumerians took place around 3000 BC. This is because there are profound differences between the Sumerian period before and after this date. The Sumerian city-states, which were ruled by the clergy in the pre-flood period, were replaced by warrior and invading emperor kings after the flood. In addition, biological and chemical age determinations of the flood remains found in Mesopotamia coincide with these dates. Another finding pointing to this date is the establishment of the largest site-states of the Sumerian period after this date and the founding legends written down by the priests of these states. The most important turning point in Sumerian history was Noah. After the flood, the neighboring site-states, which had established good relations before the flood, entered into a struggle after the flood. The struggles of the city-states, which wanted to dominate and expand over each other, continued for centuries. The Sumerians lived a prosperous life in Mesopotamia, where they set foot in 4000 BC for a very long period of 2000 years. The Sumerians, who were much more advanced than their rivals in terms of numbers, culture, and science, began to wear out as a result of their struggles with each other after the flood. The end of the Sumerians' rule in Mesopotamia was gradually approaching as other societies in the region became more populous and threatened the Sumerians. By 2800 BC, King Etana of Kish had united many Sumerian city-states and brought them under his rule. The expansion of Kish's sphere of dominance caused other city-states to develop expansion policies. Sumerian city-states fought with each other and struggled for dominance. The first threat to the Sumerians, who were weakened by these internal struggles, were the Elamites on the eastern border of the Sumerians. The Elamites, a society of Semitic origin, started to show their presence in the southwest of today's Iranian geography as early as 3000 BC. They became stronger over time and started to pose a significant threat to the Sumerians by expanding into the Sumerian-dominated areas. The first attacks of the Elamites on the Sumerians took place between 2530 and 2450 BC. During this period, they attacked the Sumerian cities with persistent offensives, posing an external threat to the Sumerian city-states and accelerating their weakening. Although the Elamite offensives weakened the Sumerians and caused territorial losses, the Sumerians were still able to survive. Although the Sumerians were exposed to external threats, the process that prepared the end of the Sumerians was internal. Sargon, whose mother was a priestess, was born after an illegitimate relationship and was secretly adopted by his mother to prevent him from being killed. Sargon, who was of Semitic descent, was appointed to the court of King Urzababa of Kish through a prestigious family from which he was adopted and gradually rose to higher and higher positions. When King Urzababa returned to his palace, defeated in a battle, he staged a coup and seized the kingdom of Kish. When he seized the kingdom of a Sumerian city-state, he forced all Sumerian city-states to obey him by taking the Akkadians of Semitic origin, who migrated to Mesopotamia from the Arabian Peninsula under his patronage, as well as the forces loyal to the kingdom, and completely destroyed the social unity of the Sumerians with his struggles. I hope that I have contributed to your getting to know the Sumerians, the first modern ancient civilization of history. Thank you for listening to me. If you want to join this historical journey, please subscribe and turn on notifications.